Now, Member of Parliament and the former Minister of State for External Affairs, Shashi Tharoor, released his 13th book earlier this week called Pax Indica. The book essentially discusses the role of foreign policies and the tangible benefits it can bring to India. Deriving example from the epic Ramayana, he says, we need to build that Rama Setu so that communication between countries of the subcontinent flourishes to a positive high. Well, to add more perspective, we're joined by Shashi Tharoor himself. Thank you so much for joining us, Shashi.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
From the rise to the great Indian novel, where you famously said that India is not a developing country, but a country in the advanced stages of decay, to now an insider narrative and reflections on the foreign policies of India. A book that many would have seen in the coming for a long time from someone with as far-reaching and a celebrated diplomatic career as yours. What finally prompted the transition?
Well, first of all, it's an issue I've been thinking about for some time. My very first book, which was my PhD thesis, Rehashed Reasons of State, was about foreign policy, focusing on Mrs. Indira Gandhi's first administration. But I thought it was time I come back to it. And there's been such a transformation in Indian policy over the last 20 years or so that hasn't been taken stock of in any book written for the general reader. I didn't want to write a book for academics and scholars laden with footnotes and charts and graphs. I wanted to write something that would be more in the nature of an extended newspaper column, something that would actually be read by ordinary thinking, educated Indians and perhaps animate living room conversations. And I thought this was the right time to do it.
You know, Shashi, a critical part of your book is also the massive potential that you think India has not tapped yet by missing the World 2.0 bus and not harnessing the power that the Internet has to offer. Do you think this, combined with the recent direction towards online censorship, are some of the concerns that the Indian government would have to address in the near future?
I'm glad to say we are beginning to use Web 2.0 tools in the last couple of years. The Ministry of External Affairs, when I was there, had actually banned the use of Twitter. Now we have a Twitter account, and even the former Foreign Secretary had a Twitter account, and messages are being used to get out. For example, the spokesman of the ministry is on Twitter. We have an excellent public diplomacy program which is on Twitter, is on Facebook. They're putting out messages, running competitions, trying to get the world interested in India. We need to leverage that and do much more of it. I would hire more staff for this purpose. I would have some public relations professionals brought into our public diplomacy arena. And I would actually try and do much more with more resources to engage with the rest of the world on the Internet. Social media platforms are a terrific way of influencing hearts and minds around the world. We've begun to explore that potential, I believe, quite effectively, and I think we should build on it.
A very prominent part of your book focuses on how India is severely understaffed when it comes to the IFS, barely matching the employee strength of Singapore's IFS and nearly one-fourth of the capacity of China's IFS. Would you elaborate a little on how you think this may impair our diplomatic efforts and whether you see this drastically changing in the near future?
Well, first of all, the Indian Foreign Service is grossly understaffed. We have a little over 800 diplomats. By comparison, Brazil has 1,200, China has 4,200, Britain has 6,600, and America has 20,000. So we are a very small service by comparison with big countries, and the comparators they have actually a country like Singapore with 867 diplomats, or New Zealand about the same number. And given our size and the size of those countries of less than 4 million people, this is frankly embarrassing. One of my concerns of late, particularly as the composition of the Foreign Service appears to have changed in recent years, is that we are choosing our diplomats through a one-size-fits-all civil service examination, which is the same one that produces customs officials, policemen, district collectors, and so on. And the fact is we have to look for different qualities in diplomats. We need people who are diplomats, not bureaucrats, people who actually have a curiosity about the world, who have an aptitude for languages, who have an extrovert personality and ability to talk to foreigners, but talent really for getting along with people from other cultures and other places of the world. You can't measure that by most of the elements in the current civil service examination. NRIs who've grown up in places like the Gulf or in Spain or France or whatever would have language skills, cultural skills, ability to adjust to foreigners. They still have Indian passports, but they wouldn't do very well in the national examinations. Give them a chance to compete in a purely internationally oriented examination, and we will actually have a lot of people who are going to be very good diplomats, even if they couldn't run a district or collect customs dues in an Indian office.
And finally, Shashi, is this book indicative of a much anticipated return to the Ministry of External Affairs?
As to whether I have to go back to the Ministry of External Affairs, it's not in my hands. There's no point in my speculating about it. If I'm offered an opportunity to serve the government, I'm of course available and proud to do so. If I'm not, I've got plenty to do.
Well, all the very best, Shashi, and thank you so much for joining us. Truly a pleasure to have you on Brand Equity.